Hey, welcome everyone. My name is David Fiedler. For those who joined after my first introduction, I'm the manager for People and Society at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Today we have a webinar where we want to talk about how to engage children and youth in business decisions that may affect their rights. We will have speakers from the Global Child Forum and from IKEA Group today with us. And we can go straight into what we're talking about today. So we'll start the webinar with just a bit of information on logistics of the webinar. Then our colleagues from the Global Child Forum will start by setting the scene, giving us some information about the work and about the framework of child rights and child participation. We then have a quick round with IKEA Group to get a business perspective into the how and why of engaging children and youth in business decision making. And then we'll have a discussion and Q&A with both the Global Child Forum and IKEA Group to just dive a bit deeper in what they have shared and really learn from them what are best practices in terms of engaging children and youth. What are kind of the motivation, what are good practices, what are do's and don'ts, and then hopefully also get questions from you and explore what you are interested in. And then just a quick closing where I will just be giving some information about what to follow in terms of our work in WBCSD, upcoming engagement opportunities, so just some save the dates for you looking at future webinars as well as workshops. As usual in our meetings and our webinars, we would ask you to avoid any discussion in any conversation that is of competitively sensitive nature. So anything that is related to pricing, costs, bid strategies, future capacity additions or reductions, customers, output decisions, we just please ask you to avoid any of those discussions. If you do, we have to stop that right away. That is the first housekeeping rule. The second set of information for you in terms of the webinar logistics, Chatham House rule, most of you know this from our meetings. We're recording this webinar so that we can make it available afterwards on our Business Human Rights Gateway and share it with the participants via email together with the slides. If you do have any questions or would like to share a comment, feel free to use the chat feature or the Q&A function. You should see a little bar at the bottom of your page with those two buttons. Feel free to use those to ask your questions. And today we will be using Mentimeter. Some of you know Mentimeter already from other meetings at WCSD. And you can participate in the Mentimeter via a browser or your mobile phone. So keep those ready. When we get there, we will share a code or a QR code that you can scan to get into the Mentimeter that we will use to get just some questions that we want to ask you so that you can participate as well in sharing those insights. With that, I would like to quickly show who our speakers are. We will also see them on screen later on. So we have Alinde Melin, Global Human Rights and Children's Rights Leader from IKEA Group, together with Jorge Santoyo, Product Developer for Play. Then Rebecca Forsman, Child Forum, together with Josefin, Bennet, Fredriksson, who is the Corporate Relations Manager at the Global Child Forum. And I would like to kick it off right away with a question. So if you go to a browser and put menti.com or on your phone, and then type the code 87421116, you will see a question popping up on the screen. And I just share that screen so that everyone can see what happens right away. Sorry, just like finding the right one here. Sorry, just got the wrong page here. There we go. So if you now type that code, you will see this question: does your company engage with children and youth in decisions that may affect their rights? Yes, no, or I don't know are your options. It's just for us to get a picture of how the participants, and this is all anonymous, we don't see who said what. So if you don't know, if your company doesn't, if they do, there's no right or wrong answer here. Just share with us if your company is already engaging with children and youth in this space. And we'll have a second question later that we will pop up towards the end of the webinar during the discussion to just get another set of answers in here around barriers. But for now, concentrate on this. And I see most of the people here in the room today do engage children and youth in their work. So that's already positive note. No one has said no. Some don't know. So I hope today with Global Child Forum and IKEA Group, we can explore how does it work, what are do's and don'ts, what are kind of best practices in terms of engaging children and helping all of you understand the motivation, the rationale behind it, the benefits it can bring, and how this actually is done. So you can still respond to this also later if you haven't been quick enough. And we just go back to the presentation and kick off with Josefin and Rebecca. Please, I hand over to you to give us a bit of a scene setting as to why that is important, how it is kind of embedded in the international expectations that are out there in terms of child rights and child participation. Just help us understand a bit the scene, and then we can go into more details of the work that you've done as Global Child Forum. Josefin, over to you.
Thank you, Davide. My name is Josefin Bennet Fredriksson, and I work as the Corporate Relations Manager at Global Child Forum. Over the past 10 years, I've actually been working with child rights and business internationally in China and in Tanzania, both for the Swedish government and for Save the Children. I actually must start by saying that I'm very impressed by seeing that many companies of you participating are engaging in children consultations. So almost hijacking a little bit from the video, but if you would like to share in the chat how you do that, if you know more about it, that would be really interesting to see. Back to me and back to us. So Global Child Forum, we are a foundation. We were initiated 10 years ago by the Swedish royal couple, the King and Queen. Our mission is to empower businesses to be a driver of change in order to create a better world for children. Our work is based on the UN Convention for the Rights of the Child, and we also draw on the children's rights and business principles that I am not sure all of you are aware of. It is a set of 10 principles that guide businesses in their interactions with children. You could say that the CRBPs are a bit like the Convention of the Rights of the Child, but for corporations. The principles were developed by Save the Children, UNICEF, and UN Global Compact, and they consider companies' workplace, marketplace, and touch points with the community where companies operate. You can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So our target group are companies. So the natural question might be why we think businesses should be concerned about children's rights. States, of course, has the primary responsibility to protect, respect, and fulfill children's rights. But the private sector has enormous potential to impact children's lives, both in a positive and in a negative way. States on their own, they can't ensure children's rights. Why we then focus to empower businesses to be a driver of change. Over the last 25 years, companies have kind of made a shift, moving from addressing risks as a way to reduce negative externalities to the idea of sustainability to be a driver of innovation, growth, competitive advantage, public trust, and ultimately long-term survival. Businesses are integrating solutions to sustainable challenges into the core of their business, and we believe that taking responsibility for children's rights should be included in that core as well. That should make sound business sense. Children make up almost a third of the world's population. Interplay with businesses as consumers, as family members to employees, and as workers. What happens during children's upbringing will characterize them throughout their lives. They are affected much more than adults. They carry experiences with them for the rest of their lives. So if one wants to ensure a stable and democratic, fair society where people can drive a society's development forward, one has to make sure that children get the right conditions to do that. And societies to consist of your employees, your consumers, your future leaders, investors, and all various ways of stakeholders. One objection I sometimes meet when I talk about children's rights and business is that in a sustainable strategy for a company, there is only so much one can address. But I would want to shift that. The Sustainable Development Goals, they have ambitions in the field of environment, and they consider what is good for children, right? If you look at it from that child rights perspective and ultimately see what would be good for children, you will ensure that the planet will survive, stay healthy in all aspects, which of course includes your company. And so we would want to promote to put on that child rights lens for you to see what you need to do in the environmental field, but also with the human rights. If you look at sustainability issues through a child rights lens, you will get what you need. And we believe that children's needs and rights are the ultimate definition of sustainability. And for us to achieve the SDGs, businesses must become fit for children. In addition to that, we also know that there are many opportunities for companies that address children's rights. Businesses that champion children's rights in their strategies and operations, they boost their reputations, the brand value, they improve recruitment, retention, motivation of employees, they attract investors, and they gain a competitive advantage. We have also actually done a study to see a bit on how this interacts, which you can find on our website. You can move to the next slide, please. So, how we spark action, the slide says. How do we then engage with companies? We are a fairly small foundation based in Sweden, but we work globally. And we want to spark actions. We have one of our flagship tools is our benchmark study. We performed the world's largest benchmark on children's rights and business. It was initiated in 2014 in collaboration with Boston Consulting Group, and it scans the largest companies by revenue from all regions, all industries, from all compass points, and identifies how they report on a set of children's rights indicators that we have put together. It is all based on publicly available information, and the purpose of the series is to enable progress to be tracked over time on how children's rights are addressed by businesses. We have over the years benchmarked 2,600 companies globally. And this data is of course also relevant for investors and other stakeholders that assess or rank companies. David, I think you can actually click so everything is, yeah, thank you. We are actually now working on a global benchmark study, which is assessing around 1,000 companies that we will launch later on this year. I can also mention that the target group, when we talk about companies that we want to influence, is aligned with the SDG 2000 list, which is a list put together by the World Benchmarking Alliance and consists of the 2,000 most influential companies in achieving the SDGs. So we do a benchmark. Another of our core activities that is also a bit spoiled in our name is that we are hosting forums, global child forums. We bring together several hundred participants from the corporate sector, from civil society, academia, and government as well. And we challenged them to find solutions to some of the most pressing issues facing children and youth today all over the world. The focus with the forums is also to provide the corporate sector with inspiration, tools and the network to do good work, and also to spark action. So apart from the benchmark and offering meeting places, we also offer knowledge sharing and tools. So we share best practices and data through reports, research products. We produce guides such as the child participation guide that my colleague Rebecca soon will share more details on with you. And we have case studies that takes more of a deep dive into how companies are responding to child rights challenges and opportunities, of course, associated with their business operations. We also house a knowledge center on our website where you can find all of our resources, tools, guides, videos. And actually, just about now, we are launching a brand new tool, which we call the Magnifier. In essence, it's a light materiality test for companies as you, assisting you to understand the risks and opportunities around your impact on children and children's rights. Digital tool, it will in the end, after you fill in the questions, recommend and guide you to all our other tools and guides, how you can further work on where you're at. It's filled with the real life case studies, also from companies, naming companies, illustrating the risks and opportunities to assure that it is practical. And that's also where we want to be. We are very much on to consulting companies on how they work, so that we also target companies in the right way. I would welcome you to go into our website and use the Magnifier. We would love to have your feedback on it, how you find it useful. That was a fairly quick effort from my end to introduce us. And I'm now happy to introduce my colleague Rebecca, who will talk about our recently launched Children Participation Guide. Over to you, Rebecca.
Wonderful. Thank you, Davida. You can actually change the slide. Perfect. So thank you very much for this opportunity to speak on this very important topic. My name is Rebecca Forsman and I work as a benchmark manager at the Global Child Forum. I also project led the Children's Participation Project. So children's participation is an interesting topic where we see a lot of potential. If done right, there is much to be gained, both for businesses and children. At the same time, children's participation is a relatively unexplored practice, and it is important to recognize that children are a group with special vulnerabilities. You can change the slide, please. So children have important things to say, and this generation is truly making themselves heard. And we can choose to partner with them. And to give you two examples at the top of my head is, of course, the Fridays for Future movement, or the Greta movement, but also the children in the US who campaign for gun control. You can change the slide, please. So to give you a little bit of background on why we started our focus on children's participation, we started exploring this topic already in 2018, and we did that through two different events. And the key takeaways from these two events were, firstly, that there is a large interest around children's participation among companies, but that many are hesitant, they're afraid of doing it wrong. So what we wanted to do was to explore this topic further, to see what companies were doing, and to ultimately provide guidance for these companies. So we ran a research project between 2019 and 2020. We didn't do it alone, and the project was led by Tara Collins, Associate Professor at the School of Ryerson, at the School of Child and Youth Care at Ryerson University, and Kate Tisdall, Professor of Childhood Policy at the University of Edinburgh. We also had a child and youth advisory group throughout the project, as well as an adult advisory group made up by corporate representatives. And the end product, as Josefin mentioned, was a guide that we launched recently in February. And I'll now tell you a little bit more about that one. So you can change slide. The key questions for the project were, In what ways do business understand and practice children's participation? What can we learn from other examples? And what supports do business require to ensure an ethical and rights-based approach? The aim of the guide was to facilitate the general business case, to assist businesses both beginning to explore participation and to support corporations that had already gotten started to inspire them further. The target group is, I would say, are you who are listening in today, the sustainability teams of multinational corporations with an interest in advancing children's rights. And this applies both to industries that directly engages with children as consumers, as well as to industries that do not market or directly sell their products to children. So you can change slide, please. So why should business involve children? Children's participation has its base in international norms and principles, and I'll go more into detail on that in the next slide. But there are benefits both to companies and to children. And as highlighted by the Child and Youth Advisory Group, as well as the Business Advisory Group, children can bring fresh, unique perspectives, both on the now and on the future. It's an intelligent way of engaging current and future customers. It creates loyalty for a brand, but it can also help highlight and to mitigate human rights risks. It can also help strengthen employee motivation. And there are also benefits to children, and children report gaining confidence and skills as a result of meaningful participation. And the Child and Youth Group highlighted that it teaches them to exercise their rights to participate and to speak up. It builds children's confidence and teaches them that their ideas are heard and valued. And lastly, that businesses are in a unique position to provide resources to help grow the next generation of leaders. Next slide, please. So what is children's participation? Children's participation is part of a larger global discourse on business and human rights. And there are a variety of international standards and norms. But just to give you a very brief overview, and these are some of the international norms of key importance. So you have the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is the most ratified of all the human rights treaties at an international level. And the convention underscores the importance of engaging with children. Under the convention, children have the right to express their own opinions, to have those opinions heard, to be protected from abuse and exploitations, and to have their privacy protected. There's also a UN committee that monitors and provides guidance on the implementation of the convention, and that is the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. And the committee has produced a general comment to provide guidance on state obligations with respect to business and children's rights. As Josefin mentioned, there are also the Children's Rights and Business Principles that were developed by UNICEF, Save the Children, and the UN Global Compact in 2012. And interestingly, these were elaborated following consultations with over 400 children across the world. And these 10 principles complement the more general UN guiding principles on business and human rights that were launched in 2011. So the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child describes participation as an ongoing process, which includes information sharing and dialogue between children and adults based on mutual respect, and in which children can learn how their views and those of adults are taken into account and to shape the outcome of such processes. And I also want to mention to you that in the guide, we defined a child as a person below the age of 18. So turning to the next slide. This all sounds really well, but how does it translate into practice, and how can this be done? So throughout the project, we've learned from a number of different companies. And to name a few cases, one is the case of Telia, who, as a consequence of their materiality analysis in 2015, realized that keeping children safe online was really a key issue for their stakeholders. So following on from this, Telia conducts a children's advisory panel every year on topics related to children's lives online. And to give you one example of what this has resulted in, it's resulted in the creation of a responsible online gaming guidelines for Telia. We also have examples from a different sector. So the Dutch Banking Association partnered with the Missing Chapter Foundation, and they held kids councils for 3 years in a row, and where they addressed a specific question each year in order to support more sustainable practices. And one of the topics that they explored was how to support good relationships between banks and customers, and where the children came up with lots of concrete examples for improvements. Children can also be involved in product design for companies with products that children use. Understanding how children can use them is really helpful. And IKEA is a great example of this, and I'm sure they'll tell you more about that in their presentation following this. And also for companies that have a big influence on the community, asking children of the community can really help to understand their perspective. So another way of doing this is to include children in human rights business assessments. And this is something that Kuni, an international travel company, did when they included children's views in their human rights impact assessments in Kenya. There's another example of when UNICEF supported a project for children's rights to be integrated into due diligence by large-scale mining companies. And to give you a very recent example, although it wasn't by a company, is that the EU just recently published a new comprehensive policy framework, and it's the EU strategy on the rights of the child and the European Child Guarantee. And these two initiatives were developed with the input of more than 10,000 children. And this was launched in February this year. So turn to the next slide, please. So these are 9 requirements as set out by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. And I won't go through all of them, but just to highlight a few. And these are really important to keep in mind as you start thinking about children's participation. So one of the things you can think about is to make sure that it's child-friendly. And this has to do with language. Is the language appropriate and easy to understand for children? That it's inclusive. This covers the issue of representation. Who are you including? Are you maybe excluding some children? That children's participation is supported by training and safe and sensitive to risk. Children are a group of special vulnerability, and therefore ensuring their safety is really key. And part of this is ensuring that those that engage with children are appropriately trained. Accountability is also really important. So it's of key importance that children feel that there is follow-up and that they feel that their views have really been taken into account. Next slide, please. As I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we saw a need for companies to understand how to do this right. And therefore, we've tried to put together a list of practical considerations to bear in mind as you started, and you can find this in the guide. So why? Being clear on the purpose. For what purpose are you involving children? Making sure that this isn't just a tick box exercise. And who? Again, the issue of representation. What children are you inviting and why? Are there children that you're not including? And as highlighted by the child and youth group, diversity is really important here. And how? Ensuring safeguarding, and also partner with people that have the experience of working with children can be a really important thing to do. And again, to follow up with the children. Young people need to know that, or they want to know what happened to their views. So the full list can be found in our guide. Next slide, please, Davide. So to conclude, as Josefin mentioned in her presentation, we feel that all companies would benefit from putting on a child's right lens, and that there's potential to really help to frame your sustainability work, particularly around the SDGs. One way of doing this practically is through children's participation. There are a number of things to take into consideration. Learn from other companies, partner with relevant organizations. Far too few are doing this. think about it as an opportunity. And there are benefits both for children and businesses. There's guidance both in our guide, but also in there are also other resources. So I would encourage everyone to consider this, have a think about it. There is a valuable opportunity here. Do get in contact and share your experiences, and visit our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. So we can go straight into the next part of this of the webinar. If you have any questions for Rebecca or Josefin, please use the chat or the Q&A functions. And we will also have them again on screen later when we open up for discussion. So I would like to go straight to Alinde and Jorge. Would invite you to join us on the screen here. And just Alinde, there you are. Perfect. Alinde and Jorge both are from the Intra-IKEA group. Alinde, if you want to just briefly introduce yourself, and then Jorge, and then we can go straight into some of the questions that I have for you. Alinde. You're still muted, Alinde.
Sorry, I've been on Easter break, so I'm going to blame my lacking Zoom skills on that. Thank you for the opportunity to join this webinar and to share a little bit about the work that we are doing in IKEA. My name is Alinde Melin. I work as human rights and child rights leader in Intra-IKEA Group. We are a global home furnishing company, for those of you who are maybe new to our brand, I don't know. And the Intra-IKEA Group is the group of companies that connects our franchisee network with our range development and our supply chain, just to say briefly about that and not go into detail on IKEA organizational structure. But then to share maybe a little bit on why we are working with engaging children and young people in our business. We in IKEA, of course, we know that and we are aware that we have a big impact on children. Children are key stakeholders of our business, so we see very much that we have a responsibility to ensure that we act on that impact and that we also listen to children and young people in our business, that we ensure that we learn from them. And I think as was raised by Rebecca earlier as well, that there's we see huge opportunity to listen to children, to learn from them and to be creative together with them. And then of course, as I think has also already been highlighted, children do have the right to be heard. So I think also as a business, it is important to recognize that as a kind of actor in society, we also have a responsibility to listen to children and to promote this right that they have to be heard. So whilst there's a business opportunity, of course, in us bringing in the voices of children and young people to understand their needs and their dreams and their views much better, because it brings a value for us as a company. It's also something that we should be doing, as I see it, and as we see it in IKEA, because it's the right of children, actually. And then I think just maybe to highlight as well, when it comes to participation of children, this is very much one element of a broader approach to children's rights that we have in IKEA. I think we have for many years been working actively on different child rights related issues, stretching all the way back to when we kind of set up our approach to called IWAYS, our Code of Conduct for Suppliers, since the 90s, and tackling issues of child labor. And then all the way to other parts of our operations where we've been working for a long time to, for example, secure that our products are safe for children. So this is not, whilst the child rights agenda is not new to us, I think child participation is definitely an element that has come in later in that journey, and that is increasingly becoming very important for us and is very much a part of our ambition moving forward. So just to maybe say a few words on the kind of background in IKEA on this topic.
Thank you, Alinde. So when I came across the work that Global Child Forum had done, it was quite new, and as Rebecca was saying, it's quite a new space to talk about how to engage children. How does IKEA do that? How do you involve children in your decisions?
Yeah, I mean, we are a large company, or actually a group of companies, so there are many ways in how we involve children and young people, be it through different events or activities across our franchisee network, etc. But important to highlight as well, as I kind of mentioned before, on where we are on our journey, I would say that we are very much still in the beginning of our journey when it comes to child participation. And being the large company that we are, we still have a way to go very much to have a stronger, more holistic approach when it comes to child participation. There are still many, many more ways that we could bring in the voices of children and youth in our business, which we really want to as well. But one of the areas of our business where we do this, where we have a quite kind of strong approach, is within our product development department that we have that develop our children's products, so the range for children. Here we have more kind of clear and set and developed ways where we engage and bring in children and young people. So there are two main ways that Children's IKEA, which this department is called, involves children. So it's both through focus groups that we call Kids Lab, where they meet face-to-face with children to give inputs and views and ideas on specific projects or products or ideas in different phases of the product development process. And then the other way is through an online panel that they have as well, which it's called Kids Panel, which the department runs together with a market research company externally. So this is more an online version of where we're able to ask questions to groups of children as well, with the same aim, basically, to secure children's views and perspective and listen to them as part of our product development process. But I also have my colleague Jorge joining the call, and he works with this day to day, so I think that he can tell you much more also about the practical work with these different activities.
Yes, thank you, Alinde. Jorge, exactly. You're not the usual representative of a WCSD member we invite. You're actually someone who hands-on works on product development. So it's great to hear from you maybe some examples of how children have been involved, and you can show and tell us a bit from your experiences from the product development angle of engaging children.
Yes, of course. Hi everyone, my name is Jorge. I'm a product design developer for toys in Children's IKEA. And let me tell you, I can talk about this product development for hours, but I'll mention just 3 examples. I'll start first with the project that I like the most, is my favorite, and also is the fastest project we have in Children's. It's called Sagoscat. What is Sagoscat? In summary, it's a project for children, by children, to help children. And it consists that children all over the world, they make their drawing of their dream soft toy. They send it to us. We picked every year 5 to 6 winners, and we turn them into real soft toys, and all the money goes to local charities supporting children's rights. And it's amazing because the kids are the designers. Like when we get the drawings, we actually don't change anything. We cannot change the color. We cannot change the way it's drawn or built. So we need to be it's quite challenging when we do the selection, because we need to select things that we can actually produce. And just by chance, I have here one prototype. It's not the final thing, but from one of the winners from this year. This is Audrey from Canada. She drew 2 sandwiches that she calls the peanut butter and jelly sandwich friends. And we added some Velcro on the hands so they can hug each other, and you can close these so they can hold hands, etc. So this is exactly as she drew it. Like, even, if there's minor details of how things are done, we have to respect that totally. So that's my favorite project that we have, where we involve kids. Another one will be, for example, our creative range. Last year we worked in it's called Mola, the creative range that we have with many types of products. And we decided to add dough for kids to build and create things. Of course, we spend a lot of time working with our supplier to find ways to make things that are safe, that have the certain quality that we want to have. And we had everything, but we had different types actually. There were different textures, there were different types of formulas that were compliant to everything we needed, but they were performing differently. So we said, we need to ask the kids. So we invited kids, we played with them for a full day. We got feedback like, I don't like this because it doesn't keep the shape that I want. I like this one more because it's more rough. So we start just analyzing everything. And by the end of the day, actually kids decided the final formula that we will start selling this year. Another example is our project Big League, which was a collaboration together with Lego, where we created a playful storage solution and a brick set. And we invited kids just to try things, see how they reacted. Do they understand the product? Do they like it? What do they do with it? What they don't do with it? And one of the things we found there was like our brick set was very focused towards houses. So they were building houses, which is nothing wrong with that, but we wanted something that can just let you expand your mind to whatever you want to build. So we changed things that Lego called play starters. So the brick set has things that makes the kids start building around it. It's not just plain basic shapes. So we start changing the play starters and we start adding more standard shapes. And we came up with a solution that when we tested it, we start seeing soccer fields, stadiums, rockets, and we were like, yes, this is great. So that's another example of a big project where we worked together with children.
Great, thank you. I think you touched on some benefits that come from engaging them. Could you say a bit more about what benefits you see, you and the team, of involving children? So we've heard, I think, the design, thinking about the materials, but what are the benefits for the business for involving children?
I mean, there's many benefits, especially because for us, we're creating products and our goal is to create great products. That's all we want, like that. We want to create amazing products. And these products we're doing toys, we're doing accessories for kids. We need to involve kids. It's for them. So developing together with them, it kind of creates a guideline, a guide for us to keep the right direction. We know these don't work. These they don't want, these they don't like. So by continuously ask them and involve them in the process, we make sure that we achieve what we want, which is to create great products.
Great. And maybe question for you and Alinde, before we go back and bring the Global Child Forum back into the discussion. What are some of the challenges when you involve children in these processes? What do other companies have to keep an eye on when they try to involve children and youth in a classic business decision-making process? And Alinde, I think if you can come back as well. Yep, there you go.
Yes, sorry. Yeah. I think maybe there are two things that I would highlight. One is in terms of challenges, which something that we earlier within IKEA is that now that we're sharing today with you, the example of our product development process, right? It is quite direct impact on children, right? So it is, as Jorge said, it's children who will be the users of our products. There's a quite obvious link to why there's also a relevance to bring their voices in, right? I think one challenge is how do we also enable the voices of children and youth to be heard in less obvious business contexts or situations or operations, where they're still very much a stakeholder that should be heard, but the impact on them might be not necessarily as kind of obvious. So I think that's one from an implementation, kind of business implementation point of view that we see is a challenge to overcome, where we need to also do some more kind of work in making the link clear and showing the benefits also internally towards that. The other, so that's one, but the other kind of more risk I would highlight, maybe, or something to take into consideration that we definitely have worked a lot with, is around the responsibility that we have when we interact with children. So of course, we talk about meaningful participation. So that's one, you know, when we bring in children and youth, and there needs to be a point to them as well, of course, and there needs to be a benefit to them. It will be a responsible interaction. So ensuring that we have safeguarding routines in place where children are supervised properly, where we have routines if something were to happen. Those aspects, I think, was quite new also to us when we kind of first kicked this work off. And that's something that we have kind of actively worked to strengthen, both connected to our product development process specifically, but also now with learnings from that, it's actually an approach we're strengthening across IKEA Group on safeguarding children. So wherever we have interaction with children and young people, we do have a particular kind of set responsibility to ensure that we do everything we can to ensure that they are not harmed as a result of our interacting with the IKEA business. And that is a big responsibility. So whilst you don't want to kind of scare off the opportunity that it brings to bring children in, it does come with responsibility. So I would just urge everyone to have that with them, as that's been a learning for us very much, and to have that perspective from the outset to start is really helpful as well. Yeah.
That's great, Alinde. I don't know, Jorge, if you want to add anything, or if we invite Rebecca and Josefin back to the discussion.
I think you covered quite well, Alinde.
Okay, great. I'm just gonna add that here so everyone can see. So Rebecca, Josefin, Alinde just mentioned, and we just looked at some of the challenges in the research you've done. Have you identified challenges or things that companies should be keeping an eye on when they try to engage children and youth? What are kind of the do's and don'ts, especially I think the don'ts of engaging children and youth?
Thank you. That's a really good question, and I think Alinde also touched upon that it's to ensure a meaningful participation. It shouldn't just be beneficial to the companies, but obviously to the children as well. But to sort of the do's, be clear on the purpose. Really think about why you're doing this. If you don't have the expertise internally, partner with an organization that do, and find a local partner. And also, I think really important, and that was highlighted by the child and youth group, is to ensure accountability, to really follow up with the children. So sort of don't just do it as a tick box exercise, and there's a lot in sort of the literature around this that highlights the problem with tokenism, so that's something you want to avoid, and also think about when you invite children for it to be a representative group. So I think don't would be sort of don't invite the children of your employees. That would be sort of a big don't. Or you do that as well, but just not only them.
Okay, great. I don't know if anyone wants to add some do's and don'ts, some learnings from engaging.
Yeah, no, I can just add that while working at Save the Children, we worked partnering with companies for child participation, and this with reconnecting with the children and youth that has been involved, to let them know what impact they had, what happened after, is of the essence, so that it doesn't just become a vacuum after they have said what they have said. So don't forget that. They care.
Great. I wanted to ask, and well, first of all, I'll invite participants to share their questions or comments via the chat or Q&A if they have any, to any of the speakers or more in general. Feel free to type them in and we'll address them. I wanted also to start asking the participants what barriers they see for their companies engaging. So it would be really helpful if you can share, I think in the chat, probably the easiest right now, just if you can share some of your experiences or what barriers you may see in engaging children and youth. And as you said, we brought on Jorge today with an angle on the design and development of products that affect children, but definitely, as Alinde and Rebecca highlighted as well, it goes way beyond. You know, it may seem obvious when you do toys or child products that you engage them in the design, but still not everyone does that. But it goes on, of course, beyond, and I think many companies in this group and the participants are not toy producers or produce child products, so they may be thinking about a different angle. So questions around there. If you also, Rebecca, Jorge, Alinde, Josefin, if you have any examples of companies that are not in this space, and that, you know, how do they and why do they involve children? If you can share anything around that while the participants maybe type their questions.
Yeah, I can just share that. I think that what Alinde points to, that it might be easier if you see the connection to children, if you have products that are focused on children. I think it's easy for a company that doesn't see their direct interaction with children to see where it could be useful. So, but I think that everyone who has had a conversation with a child or a young person also realizes that they have so many fantastic views to share. I wouldn't say that I would invite a 15-year-old to read an annual report, but hey, if they did, they could come with so much input. It would probably be too boring for them. But I think to think outside the box, it would be also like if you would build a factory or move offices, you might engage with stakeholders in the community, but do you engage children, schools? Do you see how you impact where they play football, how they commute? I mean, it's so many ways that companies have impact on children that they don't see immediately. So to like think an extra way.
It's a very good point, Josefin. I think is that something that I think Rebecca, you mentioned someone started engaging with children after the materiality analysis. Would that engagement of children and young people maybe pop up in human rights diligence processes and an impact assessment if done properly? If a child lens is taken from the companies?
Yeah, exactly. So there are two different things. So the first example you mentioned was by Telia, who I think found it really helpful to understand, to talk to children to better understand their online lives. And one example of what happened was that they developed these guidelines for responsible gaming, but other lots of other things came out of those conversations as well. And the other thing would be, both Josefin and I have been talking about the benefits of bringing in a child rights lens. And the example of Kuni, which I hope I pronounced correctly, but this international travel company who asked also children in their stakeholder, sort of as part of their human rights due diligence assessment. And that was particularly around sexual exploitation. So that was an interesting perspective to bring in. But there are different sort of also in asking children on topics relevant to them, and that goes beyond the sort of obvious product development, I'd say.
Davide, if I can just jump in with one.
Yeah, please.
Right here. Yeah, I think that this is a very important point that's being made as well in terms of the indirect impact that we have on children, right, as companies. And from our experience, many times you might miss the potential indirect impact that you have on children if you don't consciously look for it. So I think that's, I mean, the UN guiding principles and the guidance, that due diligence process gives the how, right? But in terms of looking at the particular risks to children, especially the indirect ones, where how what knockoff effects you might have on family members, etc. When we talk about wages, or when we talk about, you know, other aspects that have a high impact on workers, for example, if you don't consciously look for what are the indirect impacts on the dependents in the family or the children in particular, be that through specific consultations with children or through engaging with, it can also be representatives of children. I think that's one of the sometimes loopholes where companies tend to feel it's often difficult, and I very much you know, from our experience also share that it's very helpful to have the right partners and the right organizations that represent children's views and needs that can help as well in this guidance, because the indirect impact is often much bigger than you think, right? So you need to consciously be aware of it.
Okay, great. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has, because we're coming close to the end of the hour. I don't know if anyone has a last comment to make from the speakers, or from, just checking, I don't see chats coming in. Anything to close off before yeah, we close the webinar then? No?
No, but maybe just like to say that you would be surprised how much great and useful feedback you get from your youth. Really.
Sorry. So we've heard the great feedback. We've heard the need to have a conscious approach to engaging youth and children. So it doesn't happen by default. Even if we do a proper human rights diligence process, we still need to bring in that lens specifically. I think we heard something, partnerships and bringing in experts to help in that process. So I think quite some useful points here. Jorge shared a lot of the more practical experiences, which is great. I think we can find more of that in the case study, right, that you shared in your report. I'm going to share actually quickly, because I did prepare for the participants a slide with some of the publications of the Global Child Forum. So if you're looking for it, if you want to know more about what we've been discussing today, if you want to really get into the details, the children's participation, how to involve children in decision-making by the Global Child Forum is the report. And then the benchmarks, I highlighted here a few as well, to also look at, you know, which countries are you active in as a company, and what do you have to keep in mind and look out for. We will be sharing these slides with you so you can go and explore these publications. And of course, we will be sharing the contact details of the Global Child Forum so that you can also then engage them as one of these expert organizations playing in this field. And if you want to know more about how to do things, if you need to support in terms of designing how to engage children in your work, please feel free to then reach out to them. We are on the hour. I just want to highlight 3 dates. Again, you will see the hyperlinks when we send the slides to you. Our next discussion is 29th of April. This is an online discussion, so it's open to the public, unlike the webinar we had today, which is members only. I will be looking at the role of voluntary collaborative human rights due diligence initiatives, so balancing out a bit the debate that is currently focusing very much on mandatory as the silver bullet. Thursday, 6th of May, we will be talking about corporate security practices. This will be a webinar with ICRC and the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance. And last but not least, end of May, we want to look at the very broad topic of inequality, kind of one of the big topics that everyone has on their minds right now. We want to look at what is the role of corporate respect for human rights in addressing some of these inequalities. So we will be looking at gender, we'll be looking at racial justice, we'll be looking at poverty and what the role is of business in this very broad, very massive challenge that we're facing in the world. With that, I would like to thank Rebecca, Josefin, Alinde, Jorge for your time, for your inputs. I would like to thank the participants for joining us and wish you all a good rest of the day, evening, afternoon, depending on where you are. And I hope to see you at the next webinar. And we will be sharing the slides and the recording towards the end of this week. And then you can share them with your colleagues, with your business partners that you believe should know more about how to engage children in their business decision making. Thank you all. Thank you again, Alinde, Jorge, Josefin, Rebecca. Thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.